Municipal water is something that many people take for granted. We know that when we turn the faucet on, that clean, drinkable water will emerge. We also know that when we flush or empty the drain on the tub, that the water will go away and will be taken care of somewhere else. For today's edition of the Community Radio Hour, we ask, Northampton water, where does it come from and where does it go? Our guests are Ned Huntley, Director of the Department of Public Works in the City of Northampton, and Dave Sparks, Superintendent of the Water Division of the DPW. Let's get a little bit of background information on the two of you and on the Department of Public Works. So, Ned Huntley, you are currently the DPW Chief, yet you have a specific background in the operation of water plants?
I don't specifically have it in the operation of water plants. However, this is the reason we hire people like Dave Sparks and Alex Roseware, who is the chief operator of the plant, to run that.
I see. And Dave Sparks, so what exactly is it that you do?
Well, thanks for having us, Mary. I'm the superintendent of the Water Division. We oversee in the Water Division 3 surface reservoirs, 2 groundwater sources.
Could you speak straight into the mic?
Water filtration facilities. We have a corrosion facility, hundreds of miles of water mains. We basically serve the water to the community.
I see. But Ned Huntley, you have a broad background, I presume. In order to function effectively as the DPW chief, there must be a lot of different things that you need to know about.
That's right. There are a lot of things I have to know about, but I really leave a lot of the day-to-day operational responsibilities to the superintendents in the 7 divisions that the DPW operates.
And there are 7 divisions in the DPW, which are?
Oh, let's see. We have water, we have wastewater, solid waste, financial administration, engineering, highway. I think I'm forgetting what is water. Sewer. Yeah, there's 7 divisions.
I see, and you're in charge of all of them.
That's correct.
Well, that's a big job. Well, let's start with the source. Does Northampton draw water from both reservoirs and wells?
Yes, we do.
Now, is there an aquifer that feeds those wells?
There is an aquifer that feeds those 2 wells, that's correct.
And that's not the Barnes aquifer, is it?
No, that is not the Barnes aquifer.
What is the name of the aquifer that feeds the Northampton water supply?
Well, it's the aquifer that's in the section of the Florence section of Northampton.
Well, that's interesting. So does Northampton have a water protection plan in place? Do we have a set of regulations and a plan in place for protecting the integrity of that aquifer?
We do. We have. We report through Massachusetts DEP. We certainly monitor what's going on in the area of the aquifer around the wells. We have zones that are maintained around the well heads. The city owns the first zone around the well, which is the first 400 feet, and the additional zones we monitor closely.
So Northampton actually does own property that's within 400 feet of both of our wellheads?
That's correct.
All of it?
Yes.
So that's called the Zone 1, and the Zone 2 is the area of recharge for the well. So we immediately protect the 400 feet circular area, which is the Zone 1 around the well.
I see. So explain to me again. What is the difference between like a Zone 1 area and a Zone 2 area?
Well, a Zone 1 is actually the first 400 feet around a water supply well. The Zone 2 is dependent upon the draw of the well and how far it's taken the draw of water in the recharge area that comes in and feeds that well under normal pumping conditions.
So the Zone 2 is then essentially the recharge area.
We would draw water in from. That's correct.
It's interesting. I have in front of me a so-called SWAP report prepared for the City of Northampton by the Mass Department of Environmental Protection. Mm-hmm. Now, SWAP stands for Source Water Assessment Program.
That's correct.
Right, which is a program established under the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act, which requires that states keep an inventory of land uses within the recharge areas of all public water supply sources, and that states assess the susceptibility of drinking water sources to contamination and publicize the results. Now, the latest swap report that I could find on the web, even on the DEP website, was from 2003. Is there a more recent one for Northampton?
I don't believe there is.
Right, because the swap report says that the 2 wells that we use are highly susceptible to contamination because they are located in an aquifer that is not confined by a natural hydrogeologic barrier. So again, I guess I'll have to ask, what are we doing to protect these wells?
There are ordinances in effect, or water supplies protection zones in the city, and any development that would occur within those recharge areas are regulated by the community, such as depths of excavation between groundwater and, let's say, a foundation building. I believe it has to be 4 feet differential between the two. So we do allow limited building inside of the recharge areas. There are some regulations regarding that.
I see. Let's talk a little bit about the new water treatment plant just recently put online, which is located in Williamsburg. Now, the state required Northampton to build this plant, correct? That's
correct. There was a administrative consent order to build the plant, and also as a requirement of the federal government through the EPA.
And why was that?
I'll let Dave explain. He's better at the water chemistry than I am.
Okay, David Sparks.
Right. Well, along with being a wonderful public health barrier, this plant was built because we had violated a maximum contaminant level of a compound called haloacetic acids. That was the compound that really triggered the construction of this facility. It's important to note that the haloacetic acid isn't in the raw water of the reservoirs, but it forms once chlorine is added to the water with the organics that naturally occur in the water.
That's really interesting. So there are naturally occurring organic materials in the water, which you remediate by adding chlorine. And when you add chlorine, that forms or precipitates, or somehow it forms haloacetic acid, which is a suspected carcinogen?
Yeah, well, basically how would I put it? The organic matter is in there, and the chlorine doesn't affect that. But what happens is the chlorine is there to kill the pathogens in the water.
Right.
But what happens is the chlorine attaches to the organic matter and forms these haloacetic acids.
Right. So what we've done is we remove all the organics now with the new filtration plant prior to chlorination. We have been monitoring and testing, and the levels of these particular compounds have dropped dramatically.
So is that basically what this plant does? It removes organics?
That's correct. That's
upstream from the chlorination process.
That's correct.
And so are you now able to use less chlorine?
Yeah, we're actually, since the inception of this plant, we have been turning it down slowly, and we are now adding about half of what we used to.
So how does this plant work? You have wells and we have reservoirs, and is the water then pumped to the water treatment plant?
Well, what we have is we have 3 open surface reservoirs, and they need to be treated in this plant. We have one reservoir that will gravity feed into the plant, and the other one needs to be pumped into the plant. The third one is a much smaller reservoir that actually feeds one of the others. What we're doing at the moment is we are just using the reservoir that gravity feeds into the facility.
So the plant is really only drawing water from one reservoir currently?
Currently.
So do we have the capacity to pump the water from the other reservoirs?
Yes, we do. We have a pumping station that was part of this water treatment facility installed. What we do is the groundwater, the wells, we use about a total supply of 1% yearly out of the wells, and 99% come from the reservoirs. Anything going out of the reservoirs has to go through the water treatment facility.
I see. So how does the plant work? Like, how do you filter organics?
Well, it's water treatment is a process where we're trying to remove these microscopic particles, and all these particles have a negative charge to them. So what has to be done is we add a coagulant. It's aluminum sulfate. It's a very common water treatment chemical. which has a high positive charge. And what happens is these positive and negatives actually attract to each other and form larger clumps. It's called flock. And we can, once we...
Flock? How do you spell that?
F-L-O-C-K. And once we pull these microscopic particles together with this particular water treatment chemical, we can catch it in a filter.
I think it's F-L-O-C.
Oh, F-L-O-C,
Yeah,
right.
F-L-O-C.
We'll have to Wikipedia that one.
Right. F-L-O, right.
It's a new vocabulary word. So what are the conduits made of that bring water from the reservoirs to the plant?
Ductile iron piping is what we have in place.
Is that really old?
No, most of this is, the majority of it is brand new. Some of it was put in 1992 also, in anticipation of this water treatment facility.
So does the city, are you the person who actually operates the plant, Dave?
No, we have a crew of 5 guys that are working up there.
Are they city employees?
Yes, they are.
Wow. So did you have to hire new people?
Well, quite a few of them were promoted from within the department. When the facility was built, they were all licensed, and they were transferred up to the water filtration plant. But we did hire a chief operator.
Somebody with specific training.
Yes. His name's Alex Roseware. He's doing a fantastic job. He's had about 20 years in the water filtration business, water distribution.
So I understand that this plant is largely automated and relies largely upon computers. Is this so?
Yeah, we have very state-of-the-art equipment up there. We have something called the SCADA system, which stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. This particular computer system has 94 different monitors that will tell us how the process is working. Now, of course, all these monitors and all the equipment up there need to be maintained, so this is why we have the crew up there.
I see. You must need people who are very conversant in technology and computers, maintaining servers. You must have a degree of redundancy as well with your servers and your computers and the like.
Yeah, we do. We back all of our data up on a weekly basis, if that's what you're referring to.
I guess I'm talking about the computers themselves. That let's say one of them goes down.
The plant, the plant can be run manually. Also,
that was going to be my next question. So, is there a manual override?
There is. Yes.
Huh. So that's interesting.
Yeah, the crew up there, they're a diverse group. They have a lot of specialties as far as the water treatment. Most of these guys have been doing it for 10 years plus. We have a very good crew up there.
So let's say one of the reservoirs or wells actually did become contaminated with something far worse than naturally occurring organic material. Could this plant also be used to filter out chemicals and other toxics?
It would all depend upon the particular contaminant. Chlorine, which we do add, will inactivate many of these contaminants. Some of them we would have to take that particular reservoir offline. The odds of these things happening are very small. We do own the majority of all the watersheds up around the open surface reservoirs.
We also have a reservoir ranger that patrols on a regular basis to make sure people are not on the property also.
So that's a City of Northampton employee as well?
That's correct.
The reservoir. I want that job. I want to drive around in one of those orange
I want
trucks.
that job.
Yeah. Right. How do I apply? Right. So I assume that each house or building in Northampton has a water meter.
Right. That's correct.
Right. So do individuals and businesses pay the same rate for water?
Yes.
Have rates gone up with the advent of the new plant?
Yes, they started climbing about 10% a year for the past 4 years, trying to get the money in advance and get the users ready for the rate shock that happened.
Oh my goodness. So I guess when you're looking at the cost of this plant, there were construction costs.
And engineering costs and city time, and it all added up. It's about $28 million to design, build, and the plant and get it through startup operations. We were very lucky. We actually secured money through the Massachusetts Water Abatement Trust. They have state revolving fund loans at 2% interest. And we were very lucky to get the whole $28 million. Actually, it's $27 million and change funded at 2% Typically, when the city goes out to bond, it's typically between 4 and 5%.
Well, that's fantastic. And this is through the Massachusetts Water Abatement...
Pollution Abatement Trust.
I see. That's a wonderful thing.
It is. It's a great thing to have. The fact that there's other competing facilities looking for the same money, and it's my understanding that we just happened to have a project ready to go, and they had a block of money, and there was nobody else waiting. So,
well, that's fantastic. So it was a competitive proposal, and you were in the right place at the right time.
we were definitely in the right place at the right time.
So there were the costs of design, construction, and the like, but there are ongoing operational costs and maintenance costs, correct?
That's correct. We have an operation budget of just a little over $1 million per year. That includes all O&M costs, personal services, operation and maintenance costs, personal services. They're all included in that. It's about a $1.1 million budget.
And so is that funded through user fees? Through
the whole water division is funded through user fees. It's an enterprise fund. The city also has a solid waste enterprise fund.
What is an enterprise fund?
It's a way of community to have its own business within the community, and only the users of the system pay for it, and so it doesn't fall into the general tax rolls.
So who are the biggest water users in the city of Northampton? I assume that some of our larger industries would fall into this category.
Some industries and some educational also. Without naming specific names.
Specifics. So exactly. Is there any way of encouraging these industries and institutions to conserve water or to use water wisely?
We already see that happening. When we do our budget every year, we account for a loss of about 200,000 units of water every year because the demand is decreasing, and we think it's because of water conservation and the fact that the costs are escalating quite quickly, and people are realizing that if they put their lawn sprinklers on, they're going to be paying for the water and their sewer bills.
What about the conduit pipes that take the water from the filtration plant to the city of Northampton? Are they made of a different material?
We have a bunch of different materials. They were all popular during certain eras. We have a mix of cast iron and ductile iron in the system with a little bit of something called the AC pipe.
Are there any lead pipes?
No, we don't have any lead left. There's a very few service lines that enter private houses that are on the homeowner's side that are still lead, and we track those, and we're trying to get those out. The city will only maintain up to the property line. Everything up to the property line, from the street to the property line, is we use copper tubing in Northampton.
So that would be the responsibility of the homeowner then?
That's correct.
That's right.
Is there any sort of a program where a homeowner could get, say, a low interest loan or a grant to have those lead pipes replaced if they were found?
Not within the city. I'm not sure if there's some other funding mechanisms outside of the city they could look for.
Well, how about capacity? How much growth can Northampton accommodate with our current water sources?
I think we can accommodate quite a bit of growth. It's amazing to think that over 100 years ago, the forefathers here in Northampton thought of these areas for watersheds and created it for what we're using now. The plant has a capacity of 6.5 million gallons a day to operate through. We have a safe yield of the reservoirs of
5.04 million
gallons a day. The wells also support another million gallons a day each. And about a year and a half ago, we actually started meeting with the mayor and the superintendent of water in East Hampton and their city engineer as to start to explore regional water needs.
Are you saying that we could possibly sell water to neighboring communities?
We could actually use water all together collectively. The idea that every community has its own wastewater plant, water treatment plant, and so on and so forth. Why not look at regionalization of some systems, like we have a regional jail, we have a regional landfill, we have a regional wastewater collection plant, treatment plant, because we take all of Williamsburg's wastewater into Northampton.
Wait, all of Williamsburg's wastewater goes to the Northampton wastewater treatment plant?
It does.
Oh, well, I didn't know that. Was that some sort of a deal that was cut for putting the water filtration plant in Williamsburg?
No, it wasn't.
No?
This was done through an agreement in 1977 when the wastewater treatment plant expanded its treatment capabilities. That was part of the agreement that we had a 30-year agreement with the town of Williamsburg to receive all their sewer.
30. So that puts Williamsburg right at the cusp.
We are actually in negotiations with Williamsburg of the new agreement and the terms of it and the conditions of that agreement.
Huh. Well, let's look a little bit at wastewater. Now, when I think about wastewater treatment, I think about it, or when I think about wastewater in general, I think about it in three sections. Town sewer, homes with individual septic, and stormwater management. Would that be a reasonable way of looking at it?
Except for stormwater management, yes.
So stormwater management is a completely different channel, a completely different track.
We have a series of pipes in the ground that convey stormwater to different areas, and obviously all the sewer goes to the wastewater treatment plant. The treatment plant is also set up to receive septic system waste also from haulers, so that people that have their tanks pumped on a yearly basis or a bi-yearly basis, they can bring that to the plant and dump it in the plant, and we feed it into the plant system.
How are individual septic tanks regulated? How do you get individual homeowners to maintain their systems properly?
Well, number one is the state has a regulation called Title V, and Title V oversees underground disposal systems for wastewater from homes. They recommend that you have your tank pumped yearly, is what the recommendation is. There's some, basically the Title V really comes into effect when you go to sell your home also, because you have to pass a Title V inspection. And the people that typically don't maintain their systems are the ones that are going to be upgrading their systems at a substantial cost because of Title V if they don't take care of them.
So there would be a disincentive for somebody to put their home on the market then?
Well, I was just going to say it's a disincentive. I wouldn't put it as that, because if you buy a house at $100,000, now it's worth $300,000. That's quite an incentive.
But then this cost needs to be absorbed. The Title V.
If it fails Title V.
If it fails Title V. But there are a lot of people who never sell their homes. They just live in the same house forever and
That's
ever
correct.
and ever. So there really is no way then of knowing whether somebody living in a situation such as that is maintaining their septic system.
You don't know that. It's actually the responsibility of the homeowner to do this work or the cleanings out on a regular basis. That's what they recommend, and that's what they should be doing.
Yeah. Okay. So, but for those who are served by town sewer, let's just ask, what happens after the flush? Can you give us a basic description of how wastewater treatment is conducted in Northampton?
Sure. Basically, it all flows downhill. We do have some pump stations. We believe we have 5 or 6 pump stations in the city that actually are in low points, and they pump the waste back out and into another gravity system. And it all flows down to the Hockman Road wastewater treatment plant for treatment.
And so I'm just curious. What happens? There must be a series of filters initially?
There's actually a series of processes down there. It goes through a comm unit first, which chops up all the waste of anything that might be in there. There's a grit chamber for settling of larger debris. It goes through a clarification process. It goes through a aerator system. It finally goes through a chlorination system. Is finally discharged to the Connecticut River. Well,
how does that deal with toxics and household chemicals? Because people flush all kinds of things, and people dispose of things improperly within their septic systems. And we're talking about paints and thinners and pesticides and all kinds of nasty things.
Well, I would hope that the responsible citizens of Northampton would take advantage of our hazardous waste collection days that the Solid Waste Division offers on a yearly basis to bring these household pesticides and household hazardous waste too, so that number one, they don't go into the system and they don't get to the landfill either. That's the program that we try to promote.
And so is that once a year?
We do it once a year. 2 years ago, through a consent order with the landfill, we actually hosted a large regional event, and I spent, I think, about $65,000 on a number of events because of that consent order we had.
So when you have these days where you collect household chemicals and the like, who pays for the proper disposal?
Businesses typically pay their own way, and we charge them, but residences come in free of charge, and that's picked up through the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund.
Oh, and that's another one of those enterprise funds.
There's 3 of them in the department. There's the solid waste, the water, and the wastewater, and they're run as businesses, and the only people that pay for it are the people that use the service.
But some chemicals must be more expensive to dispose of than others. You must every once in a while on your toxic. What do you call it again?
Well, that's why there's a pre-screening list.
Uh-huh.
You have to actually register to come to our event and tell us what you're planning to bring.
I see. And so, would people be afraid of being busted if they were in possession of something that is illegal?
No, because my grandfather had something in the barn from 60 years ago, and I'm just trying to clean out the barn.
You just want to get rid of it. Like,
exactly.
Let's get rid of this DDT. And
exactly.
Let's not flush it.
Exactly.
Right.
This is kind of the kind of stuff that we want people to bring to us. In fact, with the program we did a couple of years ago, we actually did a farmer pesticide application also, so that the neighbor farming communities could bring in all their old fertilizers, things of that nature that was just sitting on their barn floors or wherever they kept them.
So after water is treated in the wastewater treatment plant, does it end up in the Connecticut River?
Yes, it does.
And how clean is it at that point?
It is pretty clean. We have a number of regulations that we have to meet with the state and the federal government, and the plant is in compliance with all those regulations.
And so is that water tested for, what parameters?
A number of parameters. We have monthly reports that we send to the state that shows our discharges to make sure we don't have exceedances. Our sludge goes out to a waste-to-energy facility out in the middle of the state. That all has to be tested also prior to them accepting it. So we have quite a bit of regulatory hurdles we have to go through on a regular basis at the plant.
The sludge goes to a waste-to-energy facility?
Yes, it does.
Now, is that burned?
Yes.
Huh.
We used to take it up to the landfill on Glendale Road.
Right.
And the state basically wanted other ways to get rid of waste rather than land disposal like that. So, there's a couple different formats you can take it. It can be a liquid waste. It can be a cake sludge. Different ways of processing that we can take out of the plant and then ship it.
Well, that's so interesting. Is there any way that sludge could be used for fertilizer, or is that against the law?
It is and it isn't. It all depends on what you find for the properties of the sludge. I mean, you can have
heavy metals. There could be heavy metals in sludge.
Exactly. There could be, and those would not be good for land applications later on.
Right.
But there are composting facilities in the Commonwealth and in other states that actually compost their sludge. The question is, do you get it to a grade where it's resellable to the general public?
I want to look at certain issues that we've had with the outgo side of our system. Like, I remember, what was it, last year or the year before, there was a big sewer backup at Meadowbrook Apartments where it seemed that raw sewerage was actually backing up into basement apartments within. Now, what was the cause of that?
The cause of that was grease. Homeowners aren't required to have grease traps. Businesses are, restaurants are, and what happens is that you have a lot of people, baking grease to anything they think are on a sewer, and anything can go down it, and eventually it just coagulates and plugs. So,
who bore the cost of fixing that situation?
The Meadowbrook Apartments did.
Meadowbrook Apartments.
That's correct.
So what did they have to do then?
They had to basically, I don't know what they did internal to the buildings, but I know they had to clean out all their lines. We made sure our system was thoroughly cleaned also, but there was some huge plugs of grease that were clogging the system. And there was a problem too with the Chinese restaurant on King Street. That's correct. There was about a year and a half ago during the winter. But as a business, then they should have been complying with certain regulations, and didn't you just tell me that restaurants need to have grease traps? Yes, they do. It's a matter of the enforcement program behind it, and we've been working for about a year now trying to come up with a program. It's a matter of how it will be implemented through the Board of Health or through the health agent. Mm-hmm. We actually go out and monitor these particular areas that we've had problems in the past on a monthly basis and test for grease to ensure that they're in compliance with the discharge. The City of Northampton has a sewer use regulation that prohibits discharges into our system like that. So right now we go actually out to a monthly basis to that facility or that restaurant and monitor the manhole, at the property line to ensure that they're in compliance. Well, let's talk a little bit about stormwater. Now, poorly managed stormwater can actually impact the quality of our source water, correct? If they're tied into the same system, that's correct.
Or a stormwater, runoff from streets and parking lots.
That's correct. Our source supply waters are in very rural areas, and you typically don't see the type of stormwater that might come from a city itself, with a lot of paved roads and oil and grease on the roads and whatever else you might get into the system. It doesn't really exist up in these rural communities where a watershed is.
Do we know that will be true in the future? The rural communities that host our watersheds, do they themselves have plans, land use plans in place which respect the integrity of the city of Northampton's recharge area?
Number one is that they're small enough that they don't have to comply with the NIPD's Phase 2, which is the stormwater regulations from the federal government and the state government. It's basically thresholds of how large the community is as to whether or not you have to meet these new standards that came out about 4 years ago as an unfunded mandate. So the city of Northampton has to do it, but not necessarily, let's say, West Hampton or Williamsburg
Whately
or
Conway,
wherever else.
Of course, Conway has this extensive state forest.
That's correct.
Which does help.
But the big thing that we want to control coming into there is really sediments and deposits, natural erosion, things like that.
So is there a coherent stormwater drainage system in Northampton, or is what we have the result of a mishmash of incremental decisions over 100 years?
You have a combination of both, because as development moved outward, they had to build stormwater systems to work with it. Mm-hmm. So we have some drain facilities in the city that are 150 years old that are still functioning, and we have ones that were installed a year ago in the subdivision.
So do you have a good handle on do you have a map of this entire system? Do you know where each of those drains go?
Yes. As part of the NIPD's Phase 2, which is the National Pollution Source Elimination System, Discharge Elimination System, excuse me, we're required to map our system, identify all the outfalls, test the outfalls. It's a 5-year progression plan of a series of activities we have to undertake. And we actually have a stormwater planner on our staff that this is his sole job, is to do that. We also have a very active global or geographic information system, a GIS system on the city, and we also have global positioning system, which is GPS. And we've been able to actually map literally all our utilities in the city.
Well, that's fantastic. Often new development will have unexpected results in terms of the stormwater drainage, the stormwater that it generates. Mm-hmm. And I think that at a recent public meeting, you mentioned that runoff from Meadowbrook apartments contributes to sporadic flooding on Elm Street, was it?
Well, actually, it's even beyond Meadowbrook on Bridge Road. There's basically, if you looked at all the top of the mountains in the area, or on top of the hills, and look at the low point, that's the watershed of that drainage area. So anyone who is upstream of that and is in a medium to high point is actually contributing to the flows of Elm Street Brook and the flooding problems we've had down there.
Was there any way that could have been anticipated?
Number one is Elm Street Brook has changed its course over the years also, mainly through just erosion from high water events and storms and so on. So it's an ever-changing system per se, a stream, a river. It's like the Oxbow being formed years ago. It's just a change in pattern of the Connecticut River. So that's part of the problem down there. The regulations, current regulations, and have been in place for a number of years, is that the subdivision rules and regulations require pre- and post-development flows equal each other, so that after you develop the property, you can't have any more water than it was naturally occurring prior to development. So that's why we have stormwater management areas in subdivisions and in commercial areas. They also have stormwater management areas that actually help clean the stormwater before it reaches its destination through best management practices.
Because it seems that land use planning, zoning, construction, and subdivision regulations that emphasize the preservation of soil health, that encourage, maintaining permeability, might really help.
This is why the stormwater regulations were approved by the City Council a number of years ago. They're actually set of ordinances under the NIPD's Phase 2. Anything over an acre in development size requires a permit from the city. so we can actually look at that and control what kind of discharges that they're going to be having.
So the city actually then would have the power to, say, encourage the use of semi-permeable pavers in the construction of parking lots. I mean, it sounds to me like this is a piece of leverage that the city has in encouraging green types of construction in larger developments.
We are looking at that. One of the biggest, I shouldn't say the biggest problem, but one of the issues we're looking at is the fact that in snowy New England, we sand also. And by sand, are we going to plug those pervious areas in the future if we construct let's say a porous pavement parking lot? We had actually discussed that in one area because it was only going to see seasonal use and not during the winter. That would be an ideal candidate. If it was used for a municipal parking lot, there might be some areas we could do it for infiltration back into the groundwater. You have to remember, though, that all of downtown Northampton is basically on top of clay. So there's going to be very little water intake back into the natural environment through clay.
There are probably things that we would do differently today than we did, say, even 10, 20 years ago. For instance, when I look at the vast swath of pavement that sits between Cons Avenue and Pleasant Street, where the old Mill River used to course through, I think to myself, that's just absurd. That's just so much pavement. It must be so bad for the environment.
Well, what it does, it just increases the flows coming off of those, and all that area was developed a long time ago prior to having these regulations in effect.
Yes, right. And I suppose at some point, if we really wanted to, we could just bust that open. We could break it, crack it, remove it.
Definitely at some point in the future that can be done. It depends on what development happens there.
It would probably be very expensive.
Actually, it's more expensive to put down than it is to tear up.
Is that so?
Yeah, sure.
That's so.
Because you got to buy the materials.
I love all this public works stuff. Yeah, we're speaking with Ned Huntley and with David Sparks from the Department of Public Works. Northampton Water. Where does it come from, and where does it go? Does drinking water delivery and wastewater treatment use a lot of energy?
Yes, it does. Mm-hmm. It does. I believe our electric bill at the wastewater treatment plant is about $300,000 a year. We're actually having an energy audit done this year just to see where we can actually save money, replace older pieces of equipment for more efficient pieces of equipment. The water treatment plant, we have an estimate only based on run times. Right. We'll get a handle probably during the course we will have a handle during the course of this year, what our actual electricity costs are, propane costs, heating costs, fuels, diesel costs for engines, et cetera, et cetera.
So have either of you given much thought to so-called green wastewater treatment options?
This is one thing that we're going to be looking through the wastewater treatment plant audit that should be completed this year as to what we can do. We've been in contact with the energy officer, Chris Mason, in the city, and he is actually leading the crusade for the city for all these audits to be done and what we can do and decreasing our dependency on fossil fuels and so on.
So how much life is left in the wastewater treatment plant?
Oh boy, I'd say besides your regular operation and maintenance work that's done in capital items, the plant's it'll still be there in 50, 70 years. Unless some new regulations come up that we have to do more advanced treatment is when you rebuild and upgrade your plants.
Or if energy inputs become more and more scarce. That's, this is, I believe, it's my opinion that this is something that may increasingly become a factor that affects everything that we do. So I guess my question, maybe it's a question for Dave. Let's say we do have a shortage of electricity. Would we still be able to deliver water to the city of Northampton?
Yeah, we're fortunate enough where we certainly could. It's a gravity system that flows off of the mountain. What would happen in that case where we could not provide treatment is the community would be notified that no treatment was happening immediately, and it could potentially trigger other actions that needed to be taken, but we could still deliver water. It would definitely affect the quality of the water.
I see, but water, you could still deliver water.
I could.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Huh.
And one of the reasons the plant was sited where it is is the fact that it was a gravity system plant. The plant actually operates through a gravity system, just the elevation of the water coming through. It's a natural flow process. In another location, we'd be pumping up all our water.
Right.
But the wastewater treatment plant itself, though, wastewater treatment would probably be more adversely affected by a lack of electricity.
It would be because you have the head of the Connecticut River, we actually have to pump our water to the Connecticut River to get it out there. You also have a series of pumps in the system to rise it and make it go through the process at the plant.
So, is there anything that either of you would like to say to our listening audience?
Well, certainly if you can, help us conserve the water. I can't speak too much for the wastewater. I'm not too familiar with the process down there, but I am the drinking water. Any conservation certainly helps. It helps us lower our costs. It helps lower the water bills for particular water meters per household, per industry. Conservation is certainly going to be the thing of the future.
Do we have a lot of leaks in the pipes that deliver the water from the water filtration plant to the city?
When we find a leak, we fix it immediately. We do not know of any at the moment.
None?
None.
We very well could have some small leaks that we're not aware of, but they will surface and we will fix them as we find them.
In this year's water budget, we have a capital item for a leak detection program to actually look at the entire water system to see if we do have any leaks that we're not aware of.
Right. There's companies that will come in and survey each section of water main, and they can determine if anything's leaking.
I see. And so are tours available of the water filtration plant and of the wastewater treatment plant?
They are. We need to know in advance. They have to be a limited group, mainly because of limited parking facilities and the fact that the staff down there are working operators. That's why they need to be coordinated in advance, and they have to be small groups so that they can be managed well.
It sounds very interesting.
It's very interesting. It is.
Yeah, it's quite a process. It's worth seeing.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Ned Huntley and Dave Sparks from the Northampton Department of Public Works. Thank you for answering these pressing questions about Northampton water. Where does it come from, and where does it go?
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mary.